Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me.
The wind whispered through the darkened branches of the forbidden forest, carrying with it a sense of foreboding that unsettled even the most seasoned wizards. Harry Potter stood at the edge of the woods, his wand clenched tightly in his hand, eyes narrowed as he scanned the ominous tree line before him. Next to him, Hermione Granger was furiously flipping through a tattered tome she'd brought with her, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. Ron Weasley paced anxiously behind them, his footsteps crunching over dead leaves. "I don't like this," Ron muttered. "I really don't like this." Harry couldn't blame him. In the weeks since the first reports of magical disturbances had reached the Ministry, a dark shadow had crept over the magical world. Creatures that had once been peaceful were now turning violent, old curses had begun to reawaken, and strange occurrences were becoming commonplace. At the center of it all was the legend of the Gate of Eternal Night, a gate so ancient and terrible that it had long faded into myth. But now, it was real, and it was here. Hermione snapped the book shut and looked up. "It's as I thought," she said, her voice grim. "The Gate of Eternal Night isn't just a doorway. It's a portal to a realm of darkness, a place where time and space twist and distort, and once it's fully opened, it'll be impossible to close from this side." Harry nodded, already knowing what she would say next. "We have to go through." Ron stopped pacing. "What? Go through? Are you serious? We don't even know what's on the other side." "We don't have a choice," Hermione replied, tucking the book under her arm. "If we don't stop whatever is trying to come through, the magical world and the muggle world will both be in grave danger." Harry looked at Ron, his expression hardening. "She's right. We can't let it happen." Ron sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I know. Doesn't mean I have to like it." With that, the trio ventured deeper into the forbidden forest. The trees grew thicker, the shadows darker, until finally, they reached a clearing. In the center stood the gate. It was enormous, taller than any of them could have imagined, carved from black stone and covered in runes that glowed faintly in the darkness. It emitted an eerie, pulsing energy, like a heartbeat from another world. The ground around it was barren, devoid of life, as if the very earth had recoiled from the presence of such a thing. "Bloody hell," Ron whispered, his voice barely audible. Harry felt the weight of the situation settle over him. This wasn't just another battle. This wasn't just another adventure. The Gate of Eternal Night represented something far more ancient and dangerous than anything they'd faced before. And he had the sinking feeling that not all of them would make it back. Hermione raised her wand, casting a series of diagnostic spells. The air around the gate shimmered in response, revealing swirling tendrils of dark magic that coiled like serpents in the atmosphere. "It's worse than I thought," she said, her voice tight with fear. "The gate is on the verge of opening. Whatever's on the other side is already trying to break through." Ron swallowed hard, glancing at Harry. "What's the plan, then?" "We go in," Harry said simply. "We find the key, close the gate from the other side, and stop whatever's trying to get out." "And if we can't find the key?" Ron asked. Harry didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence that followed was answer enough. With a shared look, they stepped forward, wands at the ready. The moment they crossed the threshold of the gate, a cold, suffocating darkness enveloped them. It was as though the air had been sucked out of the world, leaving them gasping in a void. Harry felt the ground beneath him shift, like the very fabric of reality was bending and warping. Then, without warning, they were through. The realm beyond the Gate of Eternal Night was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a twisted, nightmarish landscape where the sky was a swirling mass of dark clouds, and the ground was jagged and uneven, covered in strange, luminescent plants that seemed to pulse with dark energy. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, moving too quickly for them to catch. "This place is a broken bar," Ron began, but his words trailed off as he caught sight of a figure in the distance. A cloaked figure, standing still as stone, watching them. Harry's heart raced, his instincts screaming at him to be on guard. "Stay close," he whispered, gripping his wand tightly. They advanced cautiously, eyes locked on the figure. As they approached, the air grew colder, and a deep sense of dread settled over them. The figure did not move, but Harry could feel the malice radiating from it. "Who are you?" Harry called out, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his gut. The figure's head tilted slightly, as if considering his question. When it spoke, its voice was low and rasping, like the sound of wind through dead trees. "I am the Keeper of the Night," it said, "and you have entered my realm." Hermione's breath hitched. "The Keeper of the Night? That's impossible. You were sealed away centuries ago." The figure let out a soft, hollow laugh. "Time is meaningless here, child of the light. I was never sealed. I have always been here, waiting a broken bar watching." Harry stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "We're here to stop you." The Keeper's eyes, if they could be called eyes, seemed to flicker with amusement. "You cannot stop what is already in motion, boy. The gate has been opened, and soon, all will fall to the eternal night." Ron raised his wand, but Hermione quickly placed a hand on his arm. "Wait, we need to know where the key is." "The key?" The Keeper's voice was full of mocking. "Ah, yes, the key to close the gate. It is here, somewhere, but you will never find it. This realm feeds on your fear, your doubts. It twists your mind until you cannot tell what is real and what is not." Harry's grip tightened on his wand. "We'll find it." The Keeper's form flickered, becoming less solid, more like a shadow. "Perhaps you will," it said softly. "But you will not leave here unchanged." Without another word, the figure vanished into the darkness, leaving the trio standing in silence. Harry exhaled slowly, the tension in his body still wound tight. "We have to keep moving." They pressed on, deeper into the dark realm. The landscape around them continued to shift and change, playing tricks on their minds. Shadows became figures that whispered haunting words, and the path beneath their feet seemed to twist and bend with each step. The farther they went, the heavier the air became. It was as though the darkness itself was pressing down on them, draining their strength, their hope. Ron stumbled, catching himself just in time. "This place is messing with my head, mate. I don't know how much more of this I can take." "We have to keep going," Harry said, though he felt the same weight bearing down on him. His thoughts were clouded, his memories distorted. He could see flashes of faces of people he'd lost, moments of failure that gnawed at his soul. Hermione remained focused, her wand raised as she muttered spells under her breath, trying to keep the darkness at bay. But even she couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. As they pushed forward, a figure emerged from the shadows, different from the Keeper of the Night. It was familiar. Too familiar. Sirius Black. Harry's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, he froze. "Sirius?" The figure smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was cold, cruel. "Harry, you've failed me. You let me die." Harry's stomach churned. He knew it wasn't real and knew it was just another trick of the dark realm, but the words cut deep. "Harry, don't listen to it!" Hermione shouted, grabbing his arm. But it was too late. The illusion of Sirius moved closer, his face twisted with anger. "You should have saved me. You let everyone down. You always do." Harry's breath hitched as the words sank in. Doubt crept into his mind. Was it true? Could he have done more? "Harry!" Hermione's voice broke through the fog, and Harry blinked, shaking his head. The figure of Sirius flickered and then disappeared into the shadows, leaving Harry standing there, breathless and shaken. "We can't let this place get to us," Hermione said firmly. "It's trying to tear us apart." Harry nodded, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. Still, he forced himself to keep going, to push forward into the darkness. There was too much at stake to let the shadows win. As they continued deeper into the dark realm, the environment became even more twisted, the ground cracking beneath their feet, strange whispers echoing in the air. The trio's bond was tested, but they stayed together, knowing that only by relying on each other could they hope to survive. But with every step, the weight of their task grew heavier. The key to sealing the gate was out there, somewhere, but so was the darkness. And it was watching. The oppressive darkness pressed closer, the weight of it palpable. Each step they took felt heavier than the last, as if the dark realm itself was trying to swallow them whole. Harry could feel the magic thrumming in the air, malevolent and thick with intent. But he pressed on, forcing his legs to keep moving even as doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. Beside him, Hermione was muttering under her breath, her wand glowing faintly as she cast protective spells around them. Ron trudged behind, quieter than usual, his face tight with concentration. They had all been shaken by the illusions, but there was no time to dwell on them. The key was still out there, somewhere in this twisted place, and every second they lingered felt like another inch closer to disaster. The ground beneath them began to change, turning from the cracked, barren terrain into something smooth and almost metallic. Harry knelt and touched it, frowning as his fingers brushed against cold, polished stone. "It's changing again," Hermione whispered, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "The landscape is shifting, adapting to us." "What do you mean, adapting?" Ron asked, his voice low. "This realm, it's alive in a way. It reacts to us, to our fears, our emotions. It's part of the darkness. The closer we get to the key, the more it will try to break us." Harry stood, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Then we can't let it." They walked in silence for what felt like hours, though time had no meaning here. The air grew colder, and the darkness thickened around them, making it harder to see even with their wands lit. Harry's muscles ached from the constant tension, his senses heightened as he anticipated another attack, another illusion designed to break them. Suddenly, the darkness ahead of them shifted, and a massive structure loomed into view. It was a tower, impossibly tall and built from the same dark stone as the gate. At its peak, a faint light pulsed, dim but steady. "That must be it," Hermione said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The key," Harry agreed, feeling a surge of hope. But it was tempered by the growing sense of dread that pooled in his stomach. As they approached the tower, the air grew colder still, and a strange sound echoed around them like distant whispers, just out of reach. Harry tightened his grip on his wand, scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. The entrance to the tower was a massive archway, flanked by stone pillars etched with runes. The door itself was a slab of black stone, carved with intricate patterns that pulsed with a faint, dark energy. "It's not going to let us just walk in, is it?" Ron muttered, eyeing the door warily. Hermione shook her head, already stepping forward to examine the runes. "This is ancient magic, older than anything I've ever seen." "It's warded." "Can you break it?" Harry asked, his eyes on the dark sky, where the clouds seemed to be swirling faster, more ominously. Hermione bit her lip. "Maybe, but it's going to take time." Harry nodded, positioning himself beside her, ready for whatever might come. Ron took up a defensive stance on the other side, his wand raised. As Hermione began muttering incantations, the air around them seemed to grow heavier, thicker with each passing second. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but the words were still just out of reach. Harry tried to ignore them, focusing on the darkness ahead, but the sound was maddening, like 1,000 voices speaking at once, none of them clear. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook violently, and the stone pillars cracked, sending shards of rock tumbling down. Harry stumbled but caught himself, his heart racing. "Hermione, hurry!" Ron shouted, his voice tense. "I'm trying," Hermione snapped, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked faster, her wand sparking with energy. The door groaned, the runes flickering weakly, but it wasn't enough. Harry could feel the darkness pressing in around them, growing more aggressive, more desperate. Whatever was on the other side of the gate, it knew they were close. Without warning, a figure materialized in front of the door. It was the Keeper of the Night again, its shadowy form more defined now, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You will not succeed," the Keeper hissed, its voice sending chills down Harry's spine. "The darkness will consume you, as it has consumed all who came before." Harry stepped forward, his wand raised. "We're not like the others." The keeper laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You are all the same. You think your light can stand against the eternal night. But in the end, all light fades." With a flick of its hand, the shadows around them came alive, swirling into a mass of writhing darkness that surged toward them. "Get behind me!" Harry shouted, raising his wand. Brotgo! A shimmering barrier of light erupted from his wand, surrounding them just as the shadows slammed into it. The force of the impact sent shock waves through the ground, but the shield held. Hermione was still working, her voice strained as she chanted the complex incantations. The door groaned again, the runes flickering even more violently. "Almost there," she gasped. But the keeper wasn't done. It raised its hands, and the shadows twisted, coiling around the barrier like snakes. The pressure was immense, and Harry could feel his magic straining under the weight of it. "Harry, I can't hold it much longer," Ron yelled, his wand shaking as he reinforced the barrier from the side. "Just a little longer," Harry gritted out, his knuckles white as he poured more magic into the shield. With a final, ear-splitting crack, the door to the tower swung open, the runes shattering into a million pieces. Hermione stumbled back, panting from the effort. "It's open!" she cried. "Go!" Harry shouted, dropping the shield just as the shadows crashed into them. They ran through the door, slamming it shut behind them, cutting off the darkness. Inside, the air was still, the oppressive weight of the dark realm held at bay by the ancient magic that protected the tower. They stood in a vast, circular chamber, the walls lined with shelves filled with ancient scrolls and artifacts. At the center of the room, on a pedestal, was the key. It was small and no larger than a koi ina, but it pulsed with a faint, golden light, a stark contrast to the darkness outside. "That's it," Hermione breathed, her eyes wide with awe. Harry stepped forward, reaching out to take the key. But as his fingers brushed against it, a voice echoed through the chamber, soft, but powerful. "Only one may wield the key, and a price must be paid." Harry's hand froze, his heart pounding in his chest. "What kind of price?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, the air around them shimmered, and suddenly, they were no longer in the tower. They were standing in a familiar place at Hogwarts. But it wasn't the Hogwarts they knew. The sky above the castle was dark, filled with storm clouds, and the grounds were littered with rubble and ash. The castle itself was in ruins, its walls crumbling, its towers broken. "What is this?" Ron whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It's what will happen if you fail," the voice said, and Harry turned to see a figure standing in the shadows. It was a man, tall and imposing, with eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. "You must choose, Harry Potter," the figure said, stepping forward. "If you take the key, you will save your world, but you will lose something precious to you, something you cannot get back." Harry swallowed, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" "You will know when the time comes," the figure said, its voice softening. "But know this, that there is always a cost." Harry looked at the ruins of Hogwarts, at the devastation that would come if they failed. He couldn't let it happen. No matter the cost, he had to stop it. He turned back to the pedestal, his resolve hardening. With a deep breath, he reached out and took the key. The moment his fingers closed around it, the world shifted again, and they were back in the tower. The key pulsed with energy, and Harry felt a surge of power course through him. But there was something else, to a deep, aching sadness that settled in his chest. He didn't know what it was yet, but he knew the price had already been paid. "We have to go," he said, his voice hoarse. "The gate won't stay closed for long." They left the tower, the key safely in Harry's hand, and made their way back toward the gate of eternal night. The darkness was waiting for them, but they were ready. Harry could feel the weight of the key in his pocket, the power it held and the cost it would exact. But for now, there was only one thing left to do.